Hi, this is Bharti and welcome to today's videocast. Today we have with us Harry Aujla, Pre-Sales Director at SIOS for EMEA region. So today we are going to talk about high availability and what work SIOS is doing, especially to help customers who run their workload in SAP environment. So let's start with high availability. How do you define high availability?
High availability is essentially defined by trying to minimize the downtime around those applications which are business critical to an organization. If you're running these applications which are important to the organization, and if for whatever reason they become unavailable, this could potentially impact the operation of the business, and even worse, could even have a financial impact on the business as well. So if we can make those applications more highly available, that becomes quite a critical requirement for many businesses and companies.
This need for high availability, is this something new, or it has always been traditionally, because there are a lot of mission critical workloads, but in today's world, a lot of machine learning, AI, real-time things is going on. So talk about the workloads a bit.
Absolutely, yeah. High availability and business continuity in general is a concept that's been around for a very long time. It's nothing new. But what's happening is previously, where applications were not deemed to be so critical, they potentially weren't being protected by various IT solutions. And as the importance of these applications has increased for these businesses, whether they're applications that they're running on-premise in their own data centers, or these are sort of web-based or cloud-based applications, the reliance on these applications for these businesses is increasing. So a lot of these companies are now looking to apply high availability techniques, which can be presented in a wide variety of formats, to try and maintain the uptime on these critical applications.
How would you differentiate, or is there a separation between high availability versus redundancy?
Yeah, there's a lot of terms that get used within this availability conversation. People talk about high availability, people talk about redundancy. You have terms like disaster recovery thrown in there as well, and they can mean different things to different people some of the time. But certainly from our perspective, when we talk about high availability, it links very much into that word redundancy. Having the ability to have a backup service that's available there for us to fail over to in the event of something not right, something going out, or something in that environment becoming unavailable. So I think, you hit on the right word. Redundancy is a key word.
Now let's talk about the recent press announcement, the work. Before we deep dive into that, tell us a bit about SAP's environment. What does it look like today?
SAP's environment can, depending on how customers are using SAP, it can be quite complex. It's sort of built up of various different parts. There's different parts to the application. There's different ways in terms of how the databases on the back end are deployed. Traditionally, most SAP environments probably start off from an on-premise world, and SAP, for a lot of businesses, is actually the core part of their operation, because it touches various different parts of their organization. It can touch finance, HR, accounting, and so on. So if something like SAP becomes unavailable, that becomes a problem for a lot of customers. So what we do is we make sure we look at all of those various parts and make sure that we can provide an element of protection around those various pieces. And traditionally, what we're seeing now is a lot of those customers running SAP on premise and who are relying on that technology as a core part of their operations. They're now either moving to or thinking about moving those solutions into the cloud, really just to capitalize on the cost savings that are available when running data centers in the cloud.
So when it comes to HA, what are the unique challenges that you experience or your customers experience when they move their workloads from on-prem to cloud, or it really doesn't matter?
Well, one of the key things we see is when you're using solutions like SIOS, particularly on-premise, what we are guaranteeing is a certain level of availability for that application. sort of several years ago, there used to be what was called the availability pyramid that used to be shared, which sort of illustrated the various levels of availability and the various levels of protection you can apply in your data center, and what that equated to in the number of minutes of downtime that you could possibly experience with that level of availability. And certainly, from a SIOS perspective, we're talking about a level of availability that's called 4 nines availability, 99.99%. And what that's guaranteeing is less than an hour's worth of downtime a year. Now, what we see a lot of customers doing, particularly SAP customers who are looking at these critical workloads and they want to move them into the cloud, they're realizing very quickly that the SLAs they had around availability when they were running on premise, they're not quite the same SLAs that they can achieve when they're on the cloud, particularly with some of the native cloud features that are available for high availability. And that's essentially where SIOS step in. We come in and help customers build the SLAs that they need around availability when they're running in the cloud.
At the SAP TechEd conference, made some announcement there. One was around LifeKeeper and then DataKeeper. Let's talk about the product portfolio that SIOS has to help SAP customers. Then we'll deep dive into these two announcements.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a wide portfolio today, which are focused around both Linux and Windows. From an SAP standpoint, we actually position both of those areas. Primarily, with most of our SAP projects, they are Linux-based projects. So what we're giving customers the ability to do with our Linux-based solutions is to, at one level, protect the SAP application itself. So that allows us to monitor the various pieces that are running in SAP and monitor the health of those pieces. And if for whatever reason we find a problem or something goes down, we can fail over those pieces to a redundant server sitting in the same cluster. The application availability piece is just one part of it. What you need to do in parallel to that is also make sure you have the data availability piece as well. So in parallel to protecting SAP itself as an application, we also are running a data replication feature as well, which protects the database in parallel to the application. So if for whatever reason you do need to fail over to another node in your cluster, very importantly, we can bring the application up very quickly. So we're minimizing the amount of downtime on the application. But as equally as importantly, we're also ensuring that your data is available on that cluster node as well for a failover. Without the data, your application is going to be pretty useless.
Right. And can you briefly, quickly tell us about what are the new features of LifeKeeper 9.4 and DataKeeper?
Absolutely. So as you know, we made an announcement a couple of weeks ago where we've released the latest version of the SIOS protection suite for Linux, which is obviously our Linux-based solution. 9.4.0 actually takes a big step forward in that with this solution now, although we were using this solution to protect SAP environments, this is the first version that's actually been certified for S4 HANA. So that's sort of quite a big deal for a lot of customers who are looking to move SAP into the cloud and also possibly looking to move to S4 HANA as well. Having that level of certification from SAP actually adds a big sort of rubber stamp to the solution and gives customers the confidence that we can protect those environments.
Can you talk about some of the major highlights of these two releases? I mean, not two releases, but these two products.
So the two products we run in parallel to each other. The LifeKeeper is the application availability piece. That's our high availability clustering technology for Linux. So that's the piece that's doing all the monitoring and managing any failover or failback operations. DataKeeper is the data replication engine. So that's the piece that's keeping our data synchronized between our cluster nodes. Around sort of S4 HANA, what it allows us to do is actually go beyond a traditional 2-node cluster. So we can now do a multi-node cluster, whereby if you've got various pieces of SAP that need to be protected, you don't necessarily have to be running all of those pieces on the one cluster node. We can actually separate all of those pieces out across the cluster nodes and ensure that all of the cluster nodes are active. None of them are passive. You can have passive redundant nodes in the cluster. And certainly, when you look at SAP, there's key pieces like ASCS, the central services, and the NQ replication services. Certainly, what we try and do with our new releases, we try and sort of make sure we meet some of the best practices that SAP line set out, and we ensure that we don't try and run some of these services on the same node if we don't have to. And that's really important because it meets some of the best practices that SAP set out, like I've just mentioned. It also means we're maintaining performance across the cluster as well, and we're not bundling all the services down onto one cluster node and potentially creating any bottlenecks.
And what is the importance of this certification to the customers? What confidence it brings to them?
The importance to the customer is actually very high. As I mentioned earlier, SAP to a lot of customers is a very, very critical part of their operation. It's probably very central to everything that they do. So what a lot of customers will do is they will look very closely at what SAP are saying and doing and the advice that they're giving around running these environments, and they will only take advice from SAP in terms of what to do for various functions. So in terms of high availability, they're only going to work with a vendor who's been rubber stamped by SAP. They don't want to take that risk on running other services or other applications in that environment, particularly if they haven't been certified by SAP. I think the impact would be quite great if something were to go wrong, not just from an operational standpoint, but potentially from a financial standpoint as well. So having that level of certification is very, very important for customers. And it's also one of the reasons why we've been working very closely with SAP to get the certification in place.
And as these customers move to cloud, is there any specific cloud that you support, or is across all three major cloud platforms?
So one of the nice things about SIOS is we are completely agnostic in terms of cloud platforms. So we have customers running our solutions across all of the three major cloud platforms. But in addition to that, we can take the same technology and we can apply it to private clouds. And if you are still running your services on premise, on physical servers, we can also protect those as well. So one of our big benefits and one of the reasons why our customers like us is because we are completely agnostic, not just in terms of platform, but also in terms of operating system, application, databases, whatever.
And what does your pricing structure look like?
Pricing is built around, there's various models we can present to the customer. It really sort of depends upon what they're doing and how they want to deploy the solution. But traditionally, we used to base the pricing around each cluster node. So you would require a SIOS license for each node in your cluster. And that's sort of evolving at the moment to sort of moving towards having a whole cluster license model where you just pay for one price for one license, and within that license we'll include everything you need to get that cluster up and running and get that application protected.
Okay, Harry, thank you so much for not only explaining high availability, but also kind of giving a kind of overview of the SAP environment and how people are transitioning from on-prem to cloud and how SIOS is helping. It really doesn't matter what platform, what environment they run on, SIOS is there to help them. So once again, Harry, thank you for talking to me, and I actually look forward to seeing you in person at some event in future.
Absolutely, thank you, Scott. Well, that's